Good news is, I think we're live. We're broadcasting to the world. First thing I'd
Good.
like to do is obviously welcome to Business Insights. Today we're talking to Meryl Sukumar. I hope I got that enunciation correct. From Subsynctus. And the topic of today is how your business can actually save money through sustainability. Now, as
Mhm.
most of our viewers would know, sustainability has been going for a while. During COVID, it got overshadowed by survival, and
Mhm.
so we started using even more plastic and going backwards in a lot of ways. But to me, like sustainability is a long-term game, and I think for a lot of people in business, some people love the idea of sustainability because they get it, and other people hate it because it means they have to change
Mhm.
what they do. So, Meryl, maybe
Mhm.
give us a bit of a snapshot. Sustainability, Subsynctus, where do you fit in the market?
Yeah, really great intro. So thank you for that. Thanks for having me, David. So in terms of what Subsynctus does, I mean, we focus specifically around helping businesses with that strategy, that governance. Really, how do they change their decision making, their ideas, all at a really fundamental level to start with?
Mm.
Because the whole idea of Subsynctus, and you asked me earlier, where does the name come from? Well, it's a Latin word for shift. So it's all about shifting culture, and it starts with that sort of idealistic, cultural or change management sort of focus. But really, then what's that practical roadmap that comes out of it? What are the actions that that business can take,
Yeah.
and how can they measure and verify their progress, and also what are the benefits to their business, because there is that economic feasibility to it as well. And I absolutely understand this idea, like, that COVID has really kind of disrupted a lot of things. But
Yeah.
also, I always sort of bring up COVID as a really great example of how it's shown us a bit of an insight into what a disrupted economy can look like. And that's what climate change is doing. It's absolutely disrupting our economy, and in some instances, almost decimating the economies, like in micro ways, and now becoming bigger and bigger as we see more and more climate impact. So, yeah, it's a really good kind of example of what we need to be ready for and be ready to adapt and pivot. And that's what a sustainable economy is going to help businesses do, is both grow their business and benefit from the economic value, but also do things in a different way that is not continuously just like depleting the environmental resources that we
Mm.
are very, very limited in having at the moment.
Yeah.
So I guess, yeah, that's my long-winded answer to your short question.
Great. So if we look specifically, because obviously as a consultant, your job is to go into businesses, into corporations, and really just
Mhm.
understand, I suppose, two things. Maybe where there's an advantage in going down
Yeah,
that path of sustainability, and that could be a financial advantage. So taking
yeah.
advantage of what the government is doing to support sustainability. But is
Mhm.
there any other specific problems that you solve?
So in terms of sustainability, yeah. So I guess we specifically look at decarbonisation. So
Yeah.
helping businesses, lower their energy, their resource consumption, and part of that means also becoming more efficient,
Mm.
becoming more streamlined and optimized in their operations. So there is that monetary savings. The other thing that we also really focus on is circular economy. So it's a concept that is, well, I mean, for me, it's an older concept, but it is still relatively new in the market.
Mm.
And the idea is, how do we move away from this linear focus where we take things out of the ground, we make something out of it, we use it, and then we dispose of it. But in a
Mm.
circular economy, it's about designing out waste so that waste actually becomes a resource, and also obviously reducing our resource draw from the environment itself. And so really it creates this like cyclical sort of process through non-biological and biological systems, because obviously we've got agriculture, which is very biological, and then you've got something like machining and manufacturing, which is very non-biological. So yes, we focus on the circular economy as well, and the word in itself shows what it means. It's not just about reusing waste, it's also about building economic value through this process. So we support businesses with that, and it really starts with a strategic system that's in place.
So can you cite an example of where a circular economy approach to business is actually, because what you're talking about is improving sustainability, but more importantly, improving the profitability of a business.
Yeah,
Have you got
yeah,
examples you
definitely.
can refer to on this?
Yeah, sure. So I guess something that's quite simple as an example is, so we worked with a retail client, and they had, often retail clients get a lot of returns, right, that come back to their business, and
Yeah.
they can't resell them. Most of them don't resell them at all. So what we help the client do is create, firstly, an incentive program for customers who are buying the product and what they would get if they were to return it back to the client. And secondly, from the client's perspective, how they could then take this product and resell it, but through two different avenues. One was a, depending on the quality of the product once it was returned, but one was like, a direct sell again, almost brand new because it's still almost intact. And the other is a kind of an upcycled version of that. And so it basically created a new economic stream for them because I think returns were a huge part of their losses that they had to account for in the business. And of course, it means less demand on new products being bought
Yeah.
into the retail front. So yeah, it creates value very quickly if you just think about it as on a simplistic level.
Mm.
But even on a kind of a deeper level, if we think about in the construction industry, there's a lot of waste, and it's about looking at all of these offsite, or not offsite, but those offshoot materials that the construction site really gets rid of. There are a lot of companies that are now taking those materials and then separating them out, crushing the concrete for reuse in other concrete materials like flat pack concrete systems or glass to be used in concrete as well, or roads and transport industry as well. So there's a lot of avenues for where that waste material, which was otherwise just dumped into landfill, that can now be, it does need to go through a separation process, some sort of cleansing or kind of filtration process, but it's really valuable stuff. And even when it isn't fully um, cleaned properly or whatever back to kind of its original form, there's
Yep.
still there's other kind of sub values for it.
Mm.
So it's just about sitting with the client and going through that whole process and looking at their
Yeah.
entire like material life cycle.
So really, when we talk about sustainability, it's not just the planet that we're saving here; it's actually the cost of
Yeah,
doing business.
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
not because we were discussing this, or it was with someone else about a carpet company. Was this with you?
No, it wasn't with me, I don't
You're going
think.
to love the story then. And
Okay.
there's a carpet company, and what's decided to do is this full circle. And they
Mm,
said, we're not going to sell you carpet anymore. We're
yeah,
going to rent carpet to you. So you're going to
yeah,
pay a monthly fee for having carpet in your premises. And
yeah,
for that rental, we will maintain the carpet, which means anything
mm,
goes wrong, we'll replace it. If there's a hole, we'll
yeah,
fix it. And then
yeah,
when it starts to look ready, we will replace it. And you're paying a rental
yeah,
rather than buying the carpet.
yeah, yeah.
Now, one of the reasons they did this is that they said if we control the type of carpet and the
Mm,
volume of carpet and where we install, we can now reduce offcuts. Okay, because
mm,
a lot of waste. I don't know if you've had this experience, but if someone lays carpet in your house, they usually buy rolls, cut to shape, and there's leftovers. Okay, and those
yeah,
leftovers really are useless to them unless someone else buys
yeah,
exactly the same carpet. So the whole
yeah,
idea was how do we reduce the cost of
mm,
installation and then we can build it into an amortized view. And
yeah,
just another example, because when you talk about sustainability, I think one of the biggest issues we have in our economy is we're very, you call it linear. Things
mm,
like cars were invented and they produce transport, which is great, but they
mm,
also produce fumes. Now,
mm,
if anyone had bothered to develop the combustion engine completely, they would have reduced the amount of waste by having
mm.
some sort of waste reduction system instead of just a muffler that pours it out to the environment. That's a
Yeah,
long time ago. I think we've started to realise that the lesson was, well, it was quicker to go to market with an incomplete product,
mm-hmm.
and no one really cared in those days. And now all of a sudden, sudden we're starting to realise the impact that we
Mm-hmm.
have in these sort of one-sided evolvements
Mm,
of business. Now, the real
yeah,
issue in the past was the cost. It was like, well, it's
mm,
expensive to create a product that is environmentally friendly. And
mm-hmm.
we can have controls by government, which is
Mm,
partially what's occurring. But I think the big shift occurs when an economy sees a saving in becoming
mm.
sustainable rather
It
than just,
becomes a value, yeah.
yeah. Yeah. So what's
I
your,
love that point.
yeah.
Yeah, I love that point that you brought up because what you're saying is, yeah, it's easier to go to market with an incomplete product as long as we can get it out there and make some money. And that same, well, on that same line of thinking, the other thing is this whole design for failure kind of idea, right? Like
Mm.
our phones, we all kind of have typically thought, okay, after 2 years, I've got to get a new phone because that one's going to conk out. Well, actually, if they're designed to be better, to be more efficient, to be more longer lasting, and then there's an end game opportunity for us as the client or the customer to then resell it or repurpose it or whatever it is,
Mhm.
then it could just starts to kind of change the way we think about things, and don't just look at it as a temporary item, because right now we have such a kind of a fast consumer view on everything, not just clothing, on
Yes, we do.
literally everything. Like you see furniture, perfectly great furniture just sitting on the curbside. You would know, like Hard Rubbish Collection in Australia. It's a treasure chest.
Well, the funny little thing, because I always look around for how this works, is I don't know why, but for me personally, I drive around on hard rubbish day and I just notice what's in the piles. And there used
Yeah.
to be this thing called the ad buster was always on top of the pile, right? Because everyone bought them, never used them, and they couldn't sell them.
Yeah.
And now we've moved away from that. Now there's treadmills sitting there in these
Yeah.
piles, and there's furniture, as you said.
Mm,
And
mm,
I used to get annoyed because the council would say, "Don't put your hard rubbish out until the day of collection because we don't want
mm,
people going and grabbing things off the pile."
mm,
And it was like
mm.
that doesn't make any sense. But then,
Yeah.
like Facebook started the marketplace where there's places
Mm.
you can actually give stuff away for free.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
this is just a mindset shift. I think it's happening in the
Definitely.
economy where people are saying, well, I can chuck it out, or
Mm,
someone else might have a use for what we do. But then if
mm,
I look at a business, we have to rethink how we do business to say, well,
mhm,
we can create circles, as you suggested, at
mm,
a profit, right? And this is
mhm,
probably the key element for most businesses. They're saying, how do we maintain profitability?
mhm,
And ironically, until recently, consumption was profitability. And you talked about telephones and um, what do they call it? Forced, like forced upgrades. Yeah.
mm.
And there's
Yeah.
for that they call it life cycle. And I know from personal experience, you can buy a phone and it can last you for 3 years and it doesn't stop working. It's just that the software
Absolutely.
work on it anymore, right? Uh,
Yeah.
and so you've got all these phones sitting in your drawer that are pretty useless. Now, yes,
Yeah.
third world countries can use them and we can melt them down and turn them into other products. But if you think about how this is going to extrapolate over time, I
Mhm.
think sustainability gets built into future business. And one of the
Yeah,
reasons
definitely.
I'm on this call today is because I think a lot of
Mhm,
people can't see how that works commercially. They
mhm,
go, well, that's fine
mhm,
for people in these industries, but
mhm,
what about me? I'm a small business owner and I can't afford to be, spending more money on green product, you know,
mhm.
and if it doesn't really produce any direct benefit to me, because,
Yeah.
it's nice to look after the environment, but it's nicer to eat.
Mm.
Okay.
No, and I absolutely get it. It's a concern that, like, I often obviously come across. I
Mm,
mean, in terms of who we work with, it is usually that sort of medium-sized business to larger business. But in terms of the smaller businesses who do face a lot of these sort of resource discussions, resource availability and capital expenditure,
mm,
the thing is, it's not just about going straight for the really expensive green product or replacement packaging item or whatever it is that
mm.
might be relevant to their business. It's actually about starting with the view. It is about looking at things holistically. I mean, I love to throw, I mean, everyone hates that word, but I love to throw it around because it's actually the fact of the matter is we need to look at it systematically and then follow a hierarchy. So not just going to the big actions first, but what can we do strategically, and starting with the lower hanging fruit first. So, where are ways that we can change the way we do things, actually reduce our consumption in the first place, or reduce our production, or whatever, from whichever perspective we're looking at it. So, it's really about reducing, then reusing, then repurposing or recycling and upcycling, and so on and so forth, and then alternative forms of products that would be the costlier option, and so on. So it's not just about going to that costly option straight away. And that similar idea in the energy space, if we think about people going straight to putting solar panels on their businesses or whatever,
Mm.
it's not really about going straight to that alternative energy source. But first, how do we actually avoid using the energy in the first place in certain parts of production? Then how do we reuse or optimize, not reuse, but you've got to optimize your energy
Yeah.
consumption and integrate your energy consumption where heat can be used for electricity production or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And then, we finally look at an alternative energy source or renewables in some cases, and then potentially offsetting at the very end. So it's like a stepwise process. You don't go for the big stuff
Yeah,
straight
gotcha.
away if you can't, but how do we sort of even if you can actually go for the big stuff, my recommendation is never to do that. It's actually to look at things hierarchically, because then you start to embed really great foundational systems
Hmm.
into your business progressively, and it's much more effective long term.
I had this conversation with someone a few weeks back, and we were talking about the dominance of EVs, electronic vehicles.
Yeah,
And there's always a
yeah,
polarizing argument about, well, those batteries, they're bad for the environment, and you're still using coal to drive those cars. And I said, you're right. EVs are not the solution. The real problem is that people drive around in 2 tons of metal to get one person from one place to the other. And
exactly.
so, whether it's an EV or a petrol vehicle, it's still a 2 ton vehicle that's being mobilized to sort of drag someone
Yeah,
around. And
yeah,
so, sometimes when people are looking for, how to become more sustainable, it's not about the spending more money on the new car. It might be about getting an e-scooter or using a push bike to
yeah,
go to work, or even
yeah,
working from home. And it sort of changes the paradigm, because it's not about replacing, because the replacement
no,
idea assumes that we still need a vehicle, and it still needs to be able to tow, and it needs to have
exactly.
capacity.
Yeah.
And you go, yeah, that's true if you're trying to replace
Mm,
old with new. But if we start talking about sustainability as a common sense approach, in the old days,
mhm,
it probably wasn't that practical for people to ride, because, well,
mm,
in Victoria, they only became legal about 2 months ago.
mm, mm,
And before that, it was illegal. So it was like,
mm.
okay, no, that's not practical. And the thing I've heard about is that last mile. You probably heard that terminology, where people
No, I
take
haven't
the
actually.
scooter to go from home to the train station, and then from
Mm,
the train station to the office. And
yeah.
what that does is means there's no parking requirement, because I can shove it under my.
Mm,
I can get to the train
exactly.
station quicker, so I don't have to worry about being 1 or 2 k's from the train station. So
Yeah.
there's alternatives that have come available in ways
Mm,
people can become sustainable that didn't exist
yeah.
like three
Yeah.
months ago, even in
Yeah.
Victoria. So
Yeah.
I think it's a mindset thing. And when you talk
It
about
is.
saving
Yeah.
money, it's not just about putting solar panels on the roof, because you talked about
Mm.
that. And I know you're familiar with Singularity University at all.
No, I'm not actually.
Okay, so there's a guy by the name of Peter Diamandis, and he teamed up with another fellow, Ray Kurzweiller, who was the futurist at Google. Don't quote me on this. It's either Google or Microsoft.
Yeah.
And they created a thing called Singularity University, and they said, things are evolving so quickly right now. There's
Mhm.
something called accelerated acceleration, that we can't predict the future anymore. All we
Yeah.
ride the wave. And one of the things that Elon Musk did is he created a company called Solar City. Solar
Mhm.
City said, stop buying solar panels. We will rent them to you, and you will pay
Mhm.
less than your current electricity bill monthly
Mhm.
to have
Mhm.
solar on your house that you don't own. And when it stops
Mhm.
working, we will replace it. And if you don't want to pay
Yeah.
the fee, we will remove it. And
Mm.
that becomes a no-brainer to me, because often people
Yeah.
say, well, solar doesn't work for me. Someone has to do the maths, and I have to buy
Mm.
it, and I have to amortize it over time. And so
Yeah.
it's a risk. Okay. The way that these
Definitely.
guys
Yeah.
talk about, they said it's actually good for the environment. It costs less to deliver. So why don't we
Yeah.
just reduce the cost to the consumer from
Yeah.
day one and carry the risk
Mm.
ourselves?
Mm.
That level of thought process is what.
Yeah, is not always there. I love that you brought this up actually, because so really what, and you kind of mentioned this before as well with the carpet example, but
Yeah.
this is like moving towards a service-based industry, which is actually really economically beneficial as well for the company,
Mm.
but also for the person, of course,
Yes.
because yeah, as you said, it kind of cuts out a few of the middlemen, and then it reduces your costs, reduces your
Yeah.
risk. It's just a much more effective way to do business and run the economy.
Mm.
But also some of the things you're kind of talking about, they align back into that whole hierarchical way of thinking,
Yeah.
because it is about looking at things at a source base. Like we're not just trying to put a band-aid on, like replace like for like or slightly better. Like I'm putting a colorful, like, band-aid with pictures on it, as opposed to a boring, a plain band-aid. It's actually about going, actually, let's go back to the cut, like I'm using a gruesome example, but, let's go back to that and understand, why did we hurt ourselves in the first place? What could we have done differently next
Yeah.
time?
Yeah.
And that's that source-based thinking,
Uh-huh.
that is much more effective, and that actually needs to happen. And
Yeah.
probably As much as I like to say everybody has to do their bit, it does need to get driven down from government and bigger corporates because they're just the most influential
Mm,
in the economy and the supply chains. And so they really need to drive this new precedence of how we think about the way we buy things, the way we use things,
mm,
the way we interact with the economy, the way our social systems work. And
yeah.
it is really kind of adopting these new ways of thinking. And I think people find that scary because it's different,
Mm,
but as we've seen in the past, I mean, if we didn't change, right, we'd still have things like slavery. We'd still have, so many kind of really outdated and unthinkable sort of ways of living happening today where we throw our rubbish just out into the gutter on the street. But we don't do that anymore. Why is that? Because we've realized it smells bad. It doesn't look good. Doesn't feel good. Of course,
mm,
it's terrible for the environment.
yeah.
So yeah, why not embrace the change and kind of lean into it and also benefit from it at the same time?
Well, so when you talk about this, because there's a couple of other thoughts around transport, okay,
Hmm.
because we still think about, ownership of a car. And when you think
Yeah.
about ownership of a car, you pay for a product that you use for
Hmm.
probably an hour a day. So
Yeah.
23 hours of the day, it's sitting there doing nothing, but you own it. And the reason you
Mhm.
own it is because we've been taught as consumers we should own things. And owning
Yeah.
a nice car is sort of part of being successful. And
Yeah.
self-drive cars are eminent, right? So just go with me on this because these guys at Singularity University, they always spark my interest because they said, when self-drive cars occur, because they will,
Hmm.
it's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when.
When? Yeah.
You won't need a car anymore because what you'll
Hmm.
do is you will just go on your phone to Uber and say, I need to go to the city at 3 o'clock this afternoon. And
Yeah.
it will know where you are. It'll know how long it's going to take, and it'll tell you that the car will be waiting out the front at 2:58 or whatever
Hmm.
the time is.
Hmm.
Right? You jump in the car. It's not yours. It takes you to the destination. You jump out of the car, and it goes picks up the next person.
Hmm.
Now that's pretty cool, right? I used to think it was terrible. I'd like driving my own car, da da da.
Yeah.
I thought actually, then I can work on the way to my
Yeah.
appointment. Number one, but the other thing is the cost of ownership of a car is crazy expensive. Right?
Hmm.
Talking about
Sure
insurance
is.
and registration, and you're paying
Yeah.
insurance for the whole year, but you're using it
Hmm.
1 hour a day. You're paying registration for the whole year. You're only using it for 1 hour a day. That's less
Hmm.
than 10%. That's 5% usage. You're
Hmm.
paying for full usage. So you might not be using petrol or tires, but
Hmm.
you have a depreciating asset. So that's one piece of the puzzle. The second piece is if you didn't own a car, you wouldn't need a garage or a carport or a driveway in your house.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
And what could that space be used for then? Yeah.
well, think about how much of the house
Mhm.
driveway and a garage and a carport take up, and it's generally about somewhere
Mhm.
between 10 and 20% of your real estate. In
Mhm.
financial terms, that just means that if everyone stopped driving, your real estate portfolio increases by 20% because what
Yeah.
be a garage can now be a two bedrooms in some houses, right? If it's a double garage.
Mhm.
Now,
Mhm.
yeah, you go, well, I don't need two bedrooms. Yeah, no, but someone else might, so your house value increased. So
Yeah.
this is the ramifications of the sustainability thinking. And I think it's
Yeah.
early days because people will only do things that make sense to them financially. And
Yeah.
saying it's up to the corporates and the governments. But I think
Mhm.
when someone says to me, hey, you know what, you get rid of your cars and your house just increased in value by 20%
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
now it's got extra bedrooms in it. I go, oh, that's pretty cool. And now I don't have
Yeah.
to pay registration and insurance for the year because I just use the car.
Anymore.
And so it's a mindset shift that I need to take.
Mhm.
Because I was against this when my wife suggested it to me. She goes, "You shouldn't own a car. We should just use Ubers." I said, "Don't be
Yeah.
ridiculous. You got to have
Yeah.
a car." Right? Well,
Yeah.
soon you won't because the
Mhm.
question is, can I get somewhere for a more cost-effective rate and
Mhm.
more convenient? So, bringing this up as detail in this conversation because I think when we talk
Mhm.
about sustainability and going back to how do businesses save money through sustainability, part of it's going to be registrations and insurances. So if
Mhm.
you did the maths and you said to your employees, you know what, you can Uber to all
Mhm.
appointments, right? And we'll cover all of the cost of that. And that replaces the need for you to have a company car. And we'll
Yeah.
give you a scooter so you can go to and from home. Or,
Yeah.
but I mean, thinking about things differently. So, because
Mhm.
lots of vehicles is expensive. And then we
Yeah.
start looking at when you say closed circle, how do we now provide a rental service as opposed
Mhm.
to a saleable product? people say, well, the rental service is not going to create as profitable a sale.
Mm.
But we all know, because we all do this, right? We have things like Netflix where we're paying
Mhm.
$11 a month forever.
Yeah.
And then we have 5 other services. So everything's becoming a service that we pay for.
Yeah.
And those
Yeah.
guys aren't doing too badly out of us paying our
Oh, not at all. Yeah.
So when we think about it, a lot of businesses are valued on the
Mm.
contracts that are in place and the clients that stay. So this is the long term, the long tail, right? And I think what we're trying to go through here is this whole idea of how do we shift
Mhm.
thinking so that we're starting to go into. Is there a comment that's
Mm.
come? I heard a little click.
Yeah, I saw that comment. Yeah, they've just introduced themselves.
Yeah,
Baba Ali.
yeah, that
Yeah.
means someone's listening.
Yes,
We're
which is good.
talking to a computer, we're talking to a camera, and we're not sure. I'm hoping some people get some form of message from this because I think what you're onto
Mhm.
is the future of business, right? I don't
Mhm.
think there's any two ways about it. Those people that jump into this space and start to recognize how do we change the way we
Mhm.
operate our business, and we call
Mhm.
it sustainability, but it's got a neutral or negative connotation, which is it's an
Yeah.
overhead,
Yeah.
it's an expense, it's good for the environment, but it's not good for.
Mm.
And I don't think that's the formula.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point that you bring up, I guess, because the word sustainability has been around for so long and it's just taken on so many different kind of connotations. So actually, when you ask somebody, what does it mean? It can just mean a range of things. But I guess kind of at the core of it, what it really means, and most sustainability professionals may agree on this, is that there's the fundamental four pillars, right? It used to be
Yeah.
three, now it's, economic, social, human, and environmental. So it's really just not about the environment and animals, but it's also about people and
Mm.
people's systems.
Yeah.
It's about social interactions and how we use and interact with each other,
Mm.
use things and interact with each other. And then the economy, it's about, how do we buy, what do we buy, when it's available, all of these things. So it's just so much more than just tree hugging. And I sometimes still hear that term and I always find it really funny. I'm like, really? I don't think I've ever hugged a tree.
Well, you
you
should
know
try it.
um, so, and I've cared about the environment since I was probably 5. Like, I've never hugged a tree.
Yeah.
But it's funny. So it's just really about seeing the value in it. And
Mm.
there is absolutely value. But aside from me just saying there's value, the reality is that governments are moving this way.
Yeah.
So there's huge sort of, legislative and compliance related pressures. But
Mm.
aside from the governments moving this way, most businesses are moving this way. And it's not just the big businesses. I work with, like 5-person businesses as well. And they're moving in the same direction. So if you've got everybody sort of starting to move in this direction, seeing
Yeah.
the value, seeing the benefit, and you're out there on the back burner going, I'm not sure, I'm still not sure, you're not only not going to benefit from it, you're going to get left behind. And
Mm.
it's like with COVID, the businesses that didn't pivot, you're literally going to be left kind of either selling your business or closing it down, and that's not what we want. We want to see these businesses thrive through this transition.
Yeah.
So, start having these conversations with professionals or someone who might have this knowledge, and then expose yourself to these opportunities and these ideas, and then go from there. See what comes out of it.
Yeah, and going back to one point you made about COVID, which actually created shift in
Mm,
economy, and people started to say, "Oh no, I hate Zoom," And now it's stayed. Right? People use
yeah,
Zoom. They go, you know what? It's an
yeah,
alternative. I prefer face to
yeah,
face. The cost of travel is
yeah,
much greater than the convenience
yeah,
of. So what happens
yeah.
is people start to see things that actually make sense, and when they
Mm,
then they start to use them. And I think
mm,
what I'm really trying to get at here, and as we wrap this up, people are
mhm,
saying it's nice to be sustainable. Yes, it's nice to talk about the future of driverless cars,
mhm.
but the thing with accelerated acceleration is things are going faster and faster all the time. And the
Yeah.
way that we adapted to COVID as a economy, the global economy,
Mhm,
was quite startling because a lot of people who said, "Oh, we used to doing things this old way," they moved.
mhm.
Ones that didn't move didn't make it. And so now we've
No.
proven that people can be adaptable and they
Mhm.
can actually change things. And I think that people are thinking differently. So,
Yeah.
as a business owner, and I suppose the last thing I'd like you to come up with or talk to is this notion of I'm a small business owner. What should I be doing right now, right? In terms
Mhm.
of how the economy is going. Not this idea of I should spend more time on sustainability. I should become a tree hugger, as you called it. But what should I be doing right now that makes business sense? That's going to save me
Mhm.
money through sustainability. So, what would be your top 3 tips?
Well, I mean, the first thing I would say is go and look at your business operations and just really consider where you can reduce your consumption in the
Yeah.
first place. Like, where are the places that you can really reduce material consumption? The second thing I would say is talk to your stakeholders. So,
Mm,
talk to your customers and talk to your supply chains, talk obviously internally to your staff, and understand what are the things that they face, because that's going to give you those material
mm,
impacts that your business actually definitively has and you may have neglected in the past.
yeah.
And then probably the third thing I would say is um, go and do some sort of level one assessment on your in terms of your sustainability. And if you're not wanting to spend the money at all, then the other option for number three is potentially just look at um, a client that's sorry, a competitor that's doing the same sort of thing as you, and maybe lean on them for some ideas on how you might be able to be more sustainable yourself, and just kind of garner from that case study how you could do the same for your own business. So those are three free ways.
Yeah.
It'll take your time and effort, of course, but
Yeah.
those are three free ways. But I do think that it's about just getting it started. Take some
I
action.
believe so. And I just want to touch on there's a comment made by one of our listeners. He talks about saving
Mm,
just in an economic perspective. Sustainability is really important to social well-being, most specifically environment, which we commonly share. You know what I find interesting is that a lot of people in their home, in their own home, they clean the house because they have to
mm,
live in it. And they put
mm,
all the garbage in the bins and they just put it outside and someone comes and collects the garbage and they go,
mm,
I'm
mm,
sustaining my environment because I want to keep the value of my house up and I also want to have a great place to live. One of
mm,
my favourite mentors of all time is a guy by the name of Buckminster Fuller. And he died in 1986, unfortunately.
mm,
But he was a futurist and he was a quantum physicist. And he said,
mm,
sometimes we forget that this planet that we live on is a spaceship and it's not about who's right and who's wrong. It's about survivability because we
mm.
only have one spaceship called planet Earth, right?
Yeah.
And when it goes, it goes. So really, there's no
Yeah.
other planet that we've proven we can live on. So
Yeah.
all I'm sort of suggesting, and I'm agreeing with this comment, is that when we talk about sustainability and its connection to economic perspective,
Mm.
um, survival is a priority to most people from Maslow's hierarchy,
Mhm.
right? And
Mhm.
when we start thinking about survival of humans as a species on planet Earth,
Mhm.
spaceship, throwing your garbage out the window so it's not in your house doesn't take care of the full environment. And
Yeah.
so I think the economy will move towards it because, especially when what you talked about, when it makes sense to reduce costs through sustainability, what it does is
Mhm.
it's a double win, right? Because if I can be more
Mhm.
profitable as a business by being more sustainable, because people see value in looking after their whole
Mhm.
economy, right? Then what we start to
Yeah.
see is how the economy lines up with this idea of sustainability. Because if it does,
Yeah.
it's more expensive to be sustainable than not. I might sit there and say, well, I believe in sustainability, but the people who don't have the cash to go and
Mhm.
be sustainable won't be.
Mhm.
And I
Yeah.
feel that wrestle between it should be more cost effective to be sustainable because I
Yeah.
fact when people live on a farm and they
Yeah.
make their own food and they grow their own plants,
Mhm.
it's
Mhm.
way cheaper than going to a market and buying food. So we
Yeah.
know that
Yeah.
sustainability can be effective, profitable,
Mhm.
but what I think is missing is that people have to see that connection commercially as well. So
Yeah, yeah, most definitely. And I think that, yeah, as I said, I gave them three free options, right? Go
yeah,
and do now itself. Don't wait to kind of know it all or go for the big stuff. Just start somewhere small. Talk to your stakeholders and start to look at ways to reduce consumption and maybe lean on a competitor and what they're doing in this space and start to adopt your own sort of ideas. At
yeah,
least start there. And then if it starts to benefit your business, then maybe take some, because obviously it's going to be a very different journey if you continue to do things is sort of down the free pathway or low cost pathway than if you actually went out and then did something more comprehensive
yeah,
and dedicated to your business. So
yeah,
yeah, there's a lot of opportunity here. It's just about people taking that first step.
yeah, awesome.
And I
Meryl,
just want to say yeah, thanks to the people that are online as well, and Peter for your comment. Yeah, thanks for being here online
yeah,
with us.
yeah, it's awesome. It's awesome that we can do this and we can jump online
Hmm.
and share some thoughts because to me, I think it's super important for people in business to get it. It
Hmm.
can be profitable. You can actually save money through sustainability.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
think like
absolutely.
the avenues that you've described, the fact that the government is supporting it, all these sorts of
Hmm.
things are really helpful to making sure that this works for us. So, look, if anyone
Definitely.
wants any further advice or information from you, Meryl, what's the best way to contact you?
It's probably best to just go onto my LinkedIn, Meryl Sukumar, and you'll see my business there. My contact details are there, and we can connect directly. Send me a message. I'm always on there. I love LinkedIn.
Fantastic. All right, Meryl, look, thanks again for your time today. It's been really insightful, and I hope some of the listeners get great value out of it. So thank you.
Thank you, David. Appreciate it.